Welcome to In Our Own Defense Podcast. We're your hosts, Attorney A.D. Winters and Dr. Dolores Tarver. And we like to tell you happy Dr. King weekend for Memphis, Tennessee, here at FedEx Forum behind us. I want to remind you that this is an amazing weekend because this is not a day off, it's a day on. It's about service. Dr. King has taught us so much in all of his speeches and the way he lived his life. But in this episode, we want to talk about something great that he did about economic empowerment of our people. So if you think about it, of all of the speeches that Dr. King gave, he gave to me what was the most powerful speech, where he gave a speech about our economic well-being and how we use that in our own defense, how we use our economic empowerment in order to strengthen African Americans in this country by saying you can't treat us wrong anymore because we have the power of our own purse. And I think that was telling. This speech was done on April 3rd, 1968, here in Memphis, Tennessee. And have you had the chance, Dr. Tarver, to read up on that speech? How are you doing, by the way?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. I see you want to just jump right on in.
Oh, yeah. I'm really excited about this show.
I have had a chance to do some reading and some reflecting. Got a chance to walk around the city a little bit earlier, some of the historic places. I think for me, what stands out is how similar we are to what we're going through right now. Thinking about supporting Black businesses and where that came from, Black Lives Matter, where that came from. And, Dr. King was speaking on behalf of 2 African-American sanitation workers that were killed. They weren't receiving fair wages. They didn't have safe conditions in which to work. And we're still in that place, right? We're still navigating now for people to be able to get fair wages, for people to be able to afford to live, and also to be able to be treated in the way that they deserve and have safe places to work. We still got a long way to go in that. But this just goes to show how we are continuing to, is that a drone?
Yeah.
Continuing to deal with these same issues here now, almost 4 decades later.
Well, I think that is, and I think if we just listen to his speech, if we just kind of reflect on his speech, and we encourage you to do the same thing. Take the words from this speech that we're referring to, and we're going to get to the speech in a moment. Take the words from that speech, but we're going to try to take you back to the night. So when you go look at the video, I've had the chance to go to where he gave the speech. It was given at it was given at the Mason Temple Church of God in Christ here in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was given there. That's the international headquarters for Kojic, for the Church of God in Christ flock. It was given there. And Dr. King wasn't originally supposed to speak there. He was supposed to be working on the speech for the march the next day for the sanitation workers. He was at home. He was at the hotel, at the Lorraine Motel, working on his speech for the next day. And Ralph Abernathy, A.D. Young, they all sent Jesse Jackson back to go pick him up because the people had turned into a mob. If you've ever been in this Church of God in Christ headquarters, this Mason Temple Church of God in Christ International headquarters, you'll see, you can see how it must have felt that night. If you look at the video, you can see the shutters slamming and Dr. King shaking in the video. It was such a palpable moment. It was such a powerful moment. And Dr. King stepped up to the challenge. They sent Jesse Jackson to nowhere the Lorraine Motel, and we're going to go to the Lorraine Motel, and we're going to go to the Kojic Center shortly. But Dr. King, Jesse Jackson left the Mason Temple Church, and then he came over and he picked up Dr. King at the Lorraine Motel, and then he goes back to the Mason Temple Church of God in Christ, and he gives this phenomenal speech. And in that speech, he talks about economic empowerment of our people and how, at that point, the research had reflected to show that we were in the top 10 as African Americans. We were still poor in this country, and we were poor compared to whites in this country, but we were wealthier than all of the nations on earth, with the exception of 9. And at that point, in 1968, we had the buying power, the economic power of $30 billion. That number is amazing. It's trillions now. When you get trillions, waking up and understanding that buying power, that changes the trajectory of how you can treat people. So that's important, as you saw a lot of these businesses here today after the watch that terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol on the 6th. A lot of businesses have withdrawn their contributions to the Republican Party. So can you tell us a little bit about the speech in your own words, or can you read some of the words of the speech?
Yeah, that's why I was doing scrolling while y'all think I might have been being rude over here. I wanted to pick up a couple of these. And so I'm just going to highlight this part because it says, individually, we are poor. When you compare us with white society in America, we are poor. Never stop and forget that collectively. That means all of us together, collectively, we are richer than all the nations in the world, with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that?
And that's just powerful. That's telling. What does that mean to you, Dr. Tarver?
I think it just goes back to historically, we have had oppressors not want us to be together. We have had people know that if we work together, we are very strong. In fact, we are stronger together than we ever are individually. And so people have realized our worth even when we haven't realized our collective worth. And oftentimes we get into this thinking that we have to take on things by ourselves, or we want to be able to make all of this money and do all of these things on our own, not recognizing that we stand on the shoulders of our brothers and sisters. And it is very important that we all collectively work together to get that wealth, and that we can. We just sometimes forget about our power and our worth because we get so caught up in some of the other things that we do.
I think that's right. I think Dr. King calls it pooling those resources. Have you ever thought about what happens if we really pool the resources? You know, what Dr. King says in this speech, again, the most powerful economic speech that he ever given, he says, now, the other thing that we will have to do is this. We have to always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. Now, we are poor people, like Dr. Tarver said that he said, but he goes on to give you a direct blueprint of how you do this economic withdrawal. He says, we don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need bricks or bottles or Molotov cocktails. He said, but what you can do is, number one, as a result of this, we must ask you tonight to tell your neighbors not to buy Coca-Cola in Memphis. Go by and tell them not to buy sealed test milk. Tell them not to buy Wonder Bread and the other bread, which is Heart's bread out of Memphis. And he says, as Jesse Jackson has said, up until now, only the garbage men have felt the pain. Now we must redistribute the pain. And then he says, we are choosing these companies because they haven't been fair in their hiring practices of his people. But he says even deeper than that, we've got to strengthen black institutions. And he calls on you to take your money out of the banks in downtown and deposit your money in Tri-State Bank. We want to have a bank-in movement. This is real. Well, he says he wants to have a bank-in movement. Yeah. I believe that's part of kind of the crux in which we invented in our own defense, that we can have collective, real deal, legitimate decisions about economic empowerment and social development. We can do that by making it a point to say we take our money. How do you feel about that, Dr. Tarver?
Absolutely. I mean, if you all think back to LL Cool J, For Us, By Us, the Rush Card, I mean, there have been a lot of people who have attempted to try to get us to collectively pull together, support our own businesses, buy from our own businesses. And in that way, we know that money is going back into our communities directly. We know that we're being hired. We know that we're being paid a fair wage. I think that's one of the things that Tyler Perry decided to do when he opened his studio. Like, I want to be able to employ my people, so everybody that works here looks like me. So we don't have to bring other folks in order for us to get things done. And he's been able to sustain his industry, which goes to show that collectively, if we work together, we can make this happen. But we get, to a point where we're just in competition with each other, and that interferes with our ability to be able to connect.
I think I couldn't have said it better. This is In Our Own Defense podcast. I'm your host, Attorney A.D. Winters. with my co-host, Dr. Dolores Tarver, and this is a great opportunity for us to take a pause because I want to take you to Lorraine Motel so you can kind of experience. Dr. King was at the Lorraine Motel writing, getting ready for a speech in a march, and then he was summoned over to this church, and then we'll go over to the church to experience this and in our own defense podcast live here from Memphis, Tennessee on Dr. King Weekend.